Hey everybody, it's Mr. Baker. If you haven't done it already, when the teacher hits the pause button, I need you to go and get ready for dissection. All right? Okay. Hit pause now. All right, so your rat should be in this position, pretty much, pinned back and everything like that. What I want you to do is check it out. When you look in here, there should be this kind of tissue right here. This tissue is very thin. If you touch it, and I would like you to touch it when, well, why don't you guys just check it out for about 20 seconds. Just touch it for now. Hit pause and you can touch it. I want you to feel how thin it really is and that there's something behind it, okay? So check out the thin tissue here, and I want you to think about what it is. Why don't you take some guesses as to what this tissue is right here, and we'll come back. All right, stop now. Okay, so I was wondering if you figured out what that tissue is. This thin tissue is actually a piece of muscle. This muscle is actually the reason why you're able to breathe. It's what Miss Brandel, if you've ever had chorus, it's what Miss Brandel says to breathe from. It is your diaphragm. Now, your diaphragm is a muscle that, when it tenses up, it moves down and the breath goes in. But when it relaxes, it moves back up and the breath comes out. It moves down and the breath comes in, and it moves up and the breath gets pushed out. So this is how you breathe. And this is also how you sing, as Miss Brandel knows. What I'd like you to do is take a little time, and I want you to, either with your scissors or your scalpel, I want you to cut all the way around the outside of the diaphragm, and then take the diaphragm out, hold it up to the light, and you realize how thin it really is. Okay? So cut all the way around the diaphragm and bring it out. You can pause now. Okay, so you've taken the diaphragm out, and it should look kind of like this. Very, very thin piece of muscle with some transparent or translucent tissue in the center of it. This is what kind of goes up and down inside your body, which pushes the air out and pulls the air in, pushes the air out and pulls the air in, as it kind of goes like this. All right. Anyway, now that we've taken the diaphragm out, we can look inside here and see that there's some sort of brown, there's a brown tissue in here. There's some sort of organ in here which is brown. I was wondering if you could take some guesses as to what this brown organ might be just anterior to the diaphragm. So take some guesses and I'll come back. Stop now. So if you guessed that these were the lungs, you would be correct. The lungs are just underneath the, not just underneath, but they're just anterior to the diaphragm. Now you may be wondering, wait, these are lungs? These don't look like puffy, clouds or some sort of strange, some sort of thing that I imagine lungs to be, these, the big bunches of balloons or something like that. This is brown. Well, the reason why it's brown is because there's a lot of blood that goes into the lungs. The blood that goes into the lungs are in such small blood vessels called capillaries that they don't drain. We talked about how the rat gets drained of all its blood. Well, the blood that's in the lungs doesn't get drained. It just stays in and gets coagulated and preserved, and that's why it turns brown. And so the brown color of these lungs is because of the blood that's still inside them that never drained out. So we're going to take a closer look at these lungs, and that's the next thing we're going to do. By the way, the lungs are for, if you don't know already, the lungs are for taking the oxygen that's in the air you breathe in and giving it to the blood so that the blood can transport it through the whole body. So let's take a closer look at the lungs. What I'd like you to do when we turn this off next is you're going to take your scissors and you're going to cut. You're going to continue the cut that I told you to stop at. Remember when I said stop when you feel something stopping you? Well, now you're actually going to keep going. You're actually going to cut through this whole kind of layer right here. You're going to cut through the bone, through the muscle, through the skin, through everything, all the way up pretty much until you reach the chin of the rat. And it will crunch a little bit. And if it does crunch, you know you're cutting the right thing. Keep on cutting and cutting and cutting until you kind of get as far up as it feels like is necessary. Okay, that's pretty much it. And then, after doing the cut, you are going to open up these triangular doors, and you're going to take your thumbs, get over the animal, get over the rat. You're going to open up these doors and then push down. By pushing down, you're going to break ribs and probably end up breaking these bones as well as this goes back. So it's going to be a little bit like this. That was kind of gross. Did you hear that? It was kind of a squirt of fluid as I push down. As I push down, it exposes everything here. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But make the cut and get that open so that you can see everything that you can see here. Stop. All right. You've all opened it up and you've all seen what's here. So any ideas what this is? Take 30 seconds and entertain ideas as to what you're looking at. Specifically, what is this brown stuff here and here? I think we already talked about that. And what is this reddish, kind of marble in between these two things? So take 30 seconds and talk about that. So hopefully what you have figured out is that this is, in fact, the lungs, as we mentioned before, and these lungs kind of surround this red thing in the center, which is the heart. What we're going to do, though, right now, is we're going to take out the heart and lungs all at once. But I don't want to take out just the heart and lungs. I actually want to take out the heart and the lungs and really a little bit higher than all that. So I'm going to go all the way up here to the throat of the rat. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to go straight down into there and just snip. Okay? Go down as far in as you can and just snip that center part right here. And then you're going to take out the heart and lungs like so. There might be some other things that come along with it, and that's fine. And you should have the heart and the lungs just like this. So do that now and pause. All right. So by now you should have the heart and lungs out. The first thing that we want to look at is actually not the heart and lungs. This is the heart and the lungs from the ventral side. We're actually going to turn the whole thing around to the back. And I want you to notice a couple things. First, see this tube that's going down. When I stop this, I want you to notice this tube going down. You probably have some of it. Some of you have even longer parts of it. But this tube here goes down past the lungs and keeps going. It's actually going to the stomach. This tube is your esophagus. The esophagus goes behind the heart and lungs this way and down to the stomach. So what I want you to do is, I'm going to get really up close here. I don't know if we can do this, but I want you to see if you can find the tube. I've now, whoop, I had it. The esophagus is right here. I've got my probe down the esophagus. When I say go, I want you to probe the esophagus. But I also want you to probe the big tube right next to the esophagus. You can see that one much better. That's not the esophagus. That's not the food tube. What this big tube is the trachea. It's the air tube that goes down into the lungs. And I can actually take my probe, my straight probe, and go into one lung and then come back out and feel my way into the other lung, like that. You can actually feel where the lungs branch if you're good at this. So I want you to, when I say go, check out the esophagus. Notice how close it is to the trachea. There's a reason why you sometimes choke on your food, because it's supposed to go, the food's supposed to go down this one tube, and the other tube is right next door. A lot of times this tube, by the way, is right behind the trachea. So if you don't see it right next to the trachea, look behind the trachea and you should see the esophagus. It's a little tiny tube that you're going to have to tease out. So in total, tease out the esophagus, go into the trachea, check out the passageways into the lungs, and notice the esophagus as it travels down past the past the heart and the lungs. Do that now. Stop. Right on. Now that we've checked out the tubes and how close they are to each other, and we've probed inside and all that fun stuff, now we are going to separate the heart from the lungs, and we're going to say goodbye to the lungs for now. If you have time, you can, if you have a couple minutes at the end of the class period, the substitute may allow you to kind of cut a lung just to see what it is inside. You'll find that it is very solid inside. You can feel that. So you're going to separate the lungs from the heart, and all you're going to do is just kind of very carefully kind of tease out this from here. You're going to end up probably taking a little bit of the heart away with the lungs, and that's all right. But in the end, if you take out that, and now we're going to isolate the lungs as much as possible. We're going to kind of take off some of this, if you still have it up there. I think I may have taken a little part of the heart. That's all right. And you're going to end up with something that looks a little, shoot, I did take, oh nuts, oh well. You're going to end up with a heart that looks like this. So take a couple minutes and separate your lungs from your heart and have your heart ready for the next thing. Stop. Okay, so here's the deal. This is your heart. Your heart pumps blood to all the parts of the body. Both your lungs and your body will get blood from the heart. The heart is made of 4 chambers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right now, you are looking at this heart here and thinking that there must be 4 chambers in this heart, right in this area. But there aren't. This red part of the heart has only 2 chambers. This is where you find the ventricles. The atria are actually these dark green, not dark green, but dark brown, they almost look like leaves that are sitting on top of the ventricles. So you've got atrium, ventricles. Here's an atrium here. As I sort of said, I've ripped off the, no, well, maybe I haven't. Yeah, here's another atrium sitting over here. And atrium, and over here is another atrium. And in here are the, atrium, and over here are the 2 ventricles. So atria sitting like dark leaves on the top. Ventricle is this red thing underneath. You probably thought that this was all one thing altogether, but it's not. The atria actually kind of sit on top of the ventricles and kind of can be seen as separate from the ventricles. So find the atria and find the ventricles, and I'll see you in just a little, I want you to tell the difference between atria and ventricles unless you tore both the atria off. And we'll see you in about a minute. Go. Okay, now that we've identified the atria and the ventricles, we are now going to kind of take the atria off. So you're only going to be left with that red mass, and in that red mass there are 2 ventricles. These are some blood vessels that are coming off. This is just latex paint. I'm just gonna take it off just so it doesn't confuse anybody. All right, so here we have our ventricles. Now you can't see that there's 2 because it looks like one thing right now. Oh, whoops, here's another atrium. Here's my other atrium right here. This is what you're going to do in order to see the 2 ventricles. You're going to use your scalpel this time, excuse me, scalpel, ventricles. Notice that the ventricles, if I hold it straight up and down, the ventricles are kind of oval, and they've got a long kind of axis, and they have a very short axis up and down if you hold it that way. Okay? You're going to cut directly in this orientation along the long axis, straight from the top to the bottom of the heart. Now, I don't remember if I stopped it the last time to tell you to take off the ventricles. So what you're going to do is you're going to take off the ventricles, and then you're going to make this cut. All right, do that now. All right. So if you have cut correctly, you should end up with something that looks a little like this inside. And I know it's a little hard to see because it's kind of small. Maybe I should hold it in my palm, and it might kind of. All right. It looks like it might do a little, maybe a little bit of focusing. All right, so this is the inside of the heart, and here are the two ventricles. You should be able to, in your heart, see a little tiny ventricle surrounded by very thick red, a thick wall on this side of the heart. And over here, you should see kind of a big ventricle and a very thin wall on the outside. Your ventricle over here should kind of be a sickle-shaped or maybe a very thin banana shape, a very rounded shape right here, and a very oval shape here. The one on this side, the banana-shaped one, has a very thin wall of muscle going around it. The one here on my right side has a very thick wall around it. Which ventricle do you think pumps to the lungs? And which ventricle do you think pumps to the whole rest of the body? I'd like you to check out these ventricles and make a decision at your table. And when we come back, we'll talk about that decision. And hello, we're back to the heart. I'm wondering if you guys talked about the decision that you made about these ventricles. The fact is that this ventricle here with the very thin wall will pump to the lungs. And this thick-walled ventricle right here with the thick wall will pump to the body. The thin wall means not a lot of muscle, which means not a lot of pump. Well, that's fine because you remember the heart was right next to the lungs. And so when this weak wall pumps, it doesn't have to pump very far. So it can be weak because it's just pumping next door. This ventricle, on the other hand, has to pump a long ways, all the way from your head to your toes. And because of that, I don't know if you can see this, because of that, it needs a very thick muscly layer in order to pump that far. And that's that. If you want to, if you get the chance, you can always kind of take the blood out of the ventricles and check out, you can really check out the thin layer of muscle that's here, and you can take the blood a little bit out here. You could check out the thick layer here, but only if you have time. Next, that really pretty much does it for what we were going to talk about with the rat. If for some reason you have a lot of time left over, I am going to turn the rat over and start in again. So, if you have a good 20 minutes, this is what you can do. You're going to turn your rat over, unpin it, turn your rat over, and await further instructions. Stop now.